I think you'll agree as you walk in through this gallery space, there's a kind of tremendous vigour and energy and excitement that he brought to all that he did. I think if you look at these prints around us, you'll notice a couple of things. So the first is that there's quite an eclectic range here. We've got a really odd mixture of subject matters, of techniques going on. It's eclectic. It doesn't really pay much attention to sort of trying to be neat and sort of nicely capsuled or boxed away in different genres. It's completely all over the place. There's a lovely quote that you might find in the brochure that we produced for this exhibition. Rothenstein described these different printmaking techniques as like instruments. And why not, in the 20th century, bring these different instruments with these different sounds, these different timbres, these different kind of qualities into the same image as you would an orchestra, symphony. There's little concern for the kind of commercial idea of finishing an edition, of putting something that was sort of properly thought through and whatever. His print assistants, of which there are many that he worked with, had great sort of reminiscences of the way that he would just change his mind in the middle of what they were doing. He would sort of throw power tools at the plates that he was working on. He'd chuck in different colours all over the place. So there's a real kind of mixture of things going on. It's kind of getting away from what printmaking used to be, a way of making reproductions, into a very exploratory, creative world. Although it is very eclectic in here, although there are all kinds of different colours and textures and things going on, there are recurring characters and subjects and symbols that you'll see. I mean, you only have to look at this back wall behind me, this extraordinary wall of sort of exotic birds, cockerels. The word that Mel used to use when he came and visited and he looked at the work was compulsive. He said that Rothenstein was an obsessive, compulsive artist. He was irresistibly drawn to certain kinds of imagery, certain symbols, certain sort of recurring things. And throughout his career, they kind of took on different meanings. So the household that Michael grew up in, he was born in 1908, I think, was incredibly multicultural. There were all sorts of strange contradictions going on there. You had kind of German, Jewish identity there, kind of fraternity. You had elements of kind of Anglo-Catholic ritual and all sorts of things going on. So it's a real melting pot. And added to that, you had this wonderful mixture of artists and writers who knew his father and were coming and going as they pleased. I do actually have a recording. This is from one of the interviews that Mel did with Michael Rothenstein, I think not that long before he died in 1993. It's Michael Rothenstein's reminiscences about the kind of wonderful Christmases that he enjoyed as a young boy, and how that world of colour and splendour kind of informed everything that he did. So.
And the whole business of Christmas was really quite highly ritualised. We always had our presents on Christmas Eve, and we always opened our stockings on Christmas morning. But Christmas Eve was the big event. And when I was maybe 5 years old, I remember being led into the large, high Victorian sitting room of the house. And it was in darkness apart from the tree. And the tree towered up to the ceiling. And there were the coloured lights. And there were the glass birds, silver and blue and pink, shining among the little candles. And I was simply blinded with joy. It seemed to me so beautiful, so perfectly fulfilling, an image of endless, endless happiness, of endless joy. And that idea, that concept of lights gleaming in darkness has really resonated through all my experience of the outside world. Lights at night where we have a little place in Chelsea, walking in the evening, looking in at windows with all sorts of interesting and amusing things happening in the light beyond the street. Fairgrounds, the idea of colored lights shining out of darkness is related to a great deal that I found very, very moving. Not only the first things you think of, a moon or a cluster of stars, but something very touching about a beckoning light, a moment of human truthfulness shining in the darkness, or human lies, but that focus of bright humanity, which always seems symbolized by lights at night.
What that clip demonstrates, I mean, perhaps first of all, is that Michael Rothenstein came from quite a posh family, from quite a moneyed family. He enjoyed a nice childhood, I think. But I think it goes to show how sort of emotionally and visually open he was. The idea that this image of the Christmas tree, he must have only been about 4 or 5 years old when he mentions this memory. That idea of the Christmas tree so powerfully imprinted on him that it comes back much, much later in his work. In fact, if we look over my shoulder on this wall back here, some of the forms that you'll see on the prints, and these are some very early prints from his work in the late 1940s, early 1950s, are precisely based on the idea of baubles, twinkling lights on a Christmas tree. That must have been really one of the earliest memories he had, though, from living in Hampstead, because at the age of about 4 or 5, the Rothenstein family moved to a farmhouse in the Stroud Valley. And it's here that really the heart of what Rothenstein is about was sort of born. The kind of the imagery that you see around us really all can be traced back to these early years and this farm experience. But if you can see the birds and these great big red suns and the house on the hill, and then you look to these images behind me here, you look to the etchings of farmhouses on hills on that wall back there. He really did draw on this sort of scenery from a very early age. And then tragedy strikes in his life. In 1926, he is diagnosed with myxedema, which is a thyroid condition. And although he's not in great pain, it essentially fatigues him for the next 14 or 15 years. He can barely work. He sort of produces watercolours and things, but all of that kind of youthful energy goes unspent. And instead he sort of turns his eyes to what others around him are doing, and he starts to write, he becomes a critic. But there's a sense of this energy that is all pent up but has nowhere to go. After he marries, Michael Rothenstein decides it's the countryside that he wants to go and live in. So he goes and he moves to Great Bardfield in Essex, which is this very unlikely sort of mixing pot of artists, a little artist commune in the middle of Essex. And it's here that his art starts to burgeon. He gets his health back and he starts to work, and in particular he starts to make prints. So at the back of the room we have his very, very earliest print, which was made for the school print series, a fantastic venture that was designed to sort of get real art, contemporary art into schools. And if you look at it, you see this wonderful scene of these tractors and these lumberjacks dragging these sort of sawn down timbers, these timber fellers, sawn down logs that they're moving around. And it's a wonderful contrast to the work that we've got around here from many, many years later. Not far from where he was living, you had the headquarters of British Ford, so all these petrol tractors are suddenly populating the landscape. The world of the machine is coming in, there's a kind of urban encroachment all around. Edward Borden, another artist who lived near to him in Great Bardfield, tells him, well, why don't you have a go at lino cut? You seem to like the idea of relief printing. It's very easy, you just take a piece of lino and you can cut beautiful lines into it. I don't think Edward Borden had in mind perhaps these sort of extraordinary cockerels, something very unlike his work. He's fascinated by the idea of of culture and its dissemination through newspapers and TV and radio. For him, it's this very strange moment where we all have our little private lives. We live within our kind of own sphere, and we can open up a newspaper, and on one page of it we might see a picture of the Queen at that time, doing some royal visit, and on the next page we might see the results of an IRA bombing, and they've been reduced to the same kind of grainy dot matrix black photograph. And this kind of whiplash of images, this idea that in a newspaper you can bring these two things together and there's this sudden kind of jarring effect of different elements of the world brought together, is exactly what he's been looking to do in his printmaking. It would have been fascinating to see what Michael Rothenstein had made if he'd lived into the world of the internet and social media, I think. The reason it was so irresistibly, compulsively drawn to him was that in printmaking you can take things from the world. You can take a kind of impression of the world. And so your picture is no longer just a representation, it's no longer just a symbol, it's actually bound up with that stuff itself. Across this back wall are some of the last images that he made, some of these later woodcuts, and there's a couple on the work stairs up behind me as well. You see by the time we get to these images that we've moved away from the pop art. We've moved back to some of the things that had so kind of fascinated him as a young boy, to these exotic birds, this world of colour and fireworks and kind of resplendence. And so it seemed quite fitting that in these last years of his life, he should turn to those drawings that he'd made as a 4 or 5-year-old. This great kind of serenity, this great splendour, this great joy in the things that he saw around him. Which is a lovely way of bringing things back to where they started again for Rothenstein, coming back to the start, but also coming back to the start for us, coming back to a kind of Eden, kind of beautiful world where we're far away from the kind of the dirtiness, the grabbiness of celebrity culture. We're back in the beautiful confines of exotic birds and brilliant suns. And I think now I should probably leave it.